Corrode is going live for everyone on Valorant today, so I wanted to take a look at all of the agents in the game and give you a loose idea of which ones you should be playing versus avoiding. That'll be for various reasons, both how strong they are right now and how well they fit the map. So for example, just because Clove is still broken doesn't make them the best pick for Corrode necessarily. In fact, I will go over the controller class first, seeing as smokes are critical, and I do have Clove as my lowest ranked controller technically. Their kit just doesn't do much here. The limited range on smokes forces you to play towards mid to be able to smoke both sides, and then the metal is the only stall you have available. Don't get me wrong, Clove is obviously in a good spot in the meta right now for ranks, but purely looking at the abilities on the map, they just don't fit very well. But I would say the same thing about like Icebox, and that doesn't stop people from playing Clove on Icebox, nor should it. Now, Viper on Corrode is very similar to Viper on something like Bind in my opinion, where she is very good if you have a second controller. And the reality of ranked is you will almost never get that to happen. Her kit just makes it very awkward to properly smoke off the site. There's too many entries and ways the enemy can come from. There are some nice walls you can do if you're looking for map control and lurks. Maybe you're cooking something up with a duo or for Premier. Definitely consider Viper in that case, but otherwise I would stay away from her in ranked. And then we've got Harbor, and I don't actually think he's that bad on Corrode. His ult happens to fit both sides pretty well, whether you're attacking or retaking, and then his wall is actually pretty unique on A. You will have to be careful with some of the corners, but otherwise it's one of the few ways to smoke that site really well. His Cascade is great for taking space in mid, whether you're attacking or defending, and then the Cove could be the difference between dying to Odin spam and not. Having said all that, I personally wouldn't dream of playing him in his current state, but I do like the way that his util fits the map. Then we've got Brimstone, and he suffers a similar fate to Clove with the lack of range on smokes. However, having 3 smokes gives him the unique ability to smoke all 3 entries on the B site, which applies a lot more pressure to the defenders. Ranked games are fast paced more often than not, so you'll find yourself getting away with not having any refreshable utility, and then his ultimate also fully covers both of the sites since they're both relatively small, and overall he's definitely not the worst option. I just think you can do better. Now, Astra is the controller with the largest range, and naturally that makes her a decent pick on Corrode. On top of that, her wall is one of the few proper solutions to the Odin problem, so if you're getting cheesed, you can just drop her ultimate for a free defuse. None of that changes the fact that she's one of the hardest agents to play, particularly in lower ranks and in solo queue, so I think she fits the map well in general, but I wouldn't recommend playing her unless you're Ascendant Plus and already familiar with her. That of course leaves us with Omen, who is going to be a lot of fun to play on this map. There are plenty of nice teleports you can go for all over the place, and I especially like this play on B site where you just fully send it into heaven. His range, despite being limited, still feels okay here, and then there are some really powerful flash lines you can use, some of them being right off the barrier, and some of them later into the round. He does have a pretty low win rate in ranked, but I still think that Omen fits this map very well, definitely one of his better maps. So those are all of the controllers. I definitely think that I'll be playing Omen the most on Corrode, and that's coming from somewhat of an Astra main. But other than Omen, I will probably play some Clove as well. I mean, the range of their smokes is terrible for this map, but then the pick me up and the smoking after dying just feels so good in ranked. A lot of fun to play, and I think you can be fine with Clove, even though technically they're bad on Corrode. Now I'll go over the Sentinels, and calling Sage the worst feels a bit harsh because I don't even think she's that bad. But the reality is she gives absolutely zero information, and Deadlock locks down sites better than her. There will still be some cool walls you can go for, which I'm sure you'll see people trying in your games, and you do get somewhat guaranteed value between the wall and slow. People will like having a heal and a res on their team. I just think every other Sentinel gives you more useful utility. I actually have Killjoy next, and even though she has a few good lockdown spots on this map, I think that is about all she has going for her, and even then, like, here is the lockdown you would use to attack A, which looks pretty good in theory, but that can just be wallbanked. The limited range on her util hurts a little bit since it's such a big map, but I'm sure there are some nice setups you can find if you are a dedicated Killjoy player. I would just rather some of the other Sentinels on my team for Corrode. Deadlock is an interesting one. Some parts of the map feel too wide for her to have an impact, but eventually the enemy is going to be walking through something a little more narrow, and there are a lot of creative places you can find for the sonic sensors. Then her net is just a really strong ability anywhere now that it's refreshable. It still has such a wide radius as well, and then her ultimate is always going to feel good in post plant, and if you play around with this window on the A side a bit, you can probably get it to land just about anywhere in a 1v1. Next is Chamber, and I mean, he's already the ranked Sentinel that people insta-lock and play regardless of the map, and it just so happens that he actually fits Corrode nicely. The long sightline in mid will be perfect for whenever you feel like AWPing, and then on either side there are some solid spots for your rendezvous where you can just walk out and then teleport back to safety after you get one. He is limited by the range on his trip to a degree, but I've found there is still time to make some decent setups, and in general you'll probably have a decent time playing chamber here. Now Cypher is going to run pretty rampant on Corrode in ranked. I don't even want to think about some of the trips that people are going to cook up, and I'm sure you've seen already just how spammable both of these sites are. Beyond that though, he obviously doesn't have the same lack of range that other sentinels do, so he's great at just passively maintaining map control, and he's going to be a pretty solid pick on this map. My best pick for all the sentinels though is definitely Vyse. She's got some of the best hard lockdown in the game, even after the nerfs to her Razorvine, and is also able to get really solid information through both the wall and the flash. The flash in particular feels strong on Corrode. I think there are a lot of good spots you can find sort of tucked away in the terrain, and I really like this flash for defending A, since anyone holding from sight or link won't get blinded by it. Her ult makes her feel like an initiator at times, so as long as your opponents aren't Deagle Demons, I think Vyse is the best sentinel for this map. That is how I would rank all of the sentinels together on Corrode. I do believe you can get any of them to work if you try. I would definitely be leaning towards the ones with longer range and better information. Now we've got the initiators, and unfortunately I've got KO in last. He's just poor in ranked in general, and there's not that much that stands out to me about him on this map. I suppose there are some okay knife spots and you can 3-2-1 pop to your heart's content, but I don't think there is enough KO does on this map to pick him over other initiators. That brings us to Skye, who feels rough to play right now, and I don't think she puts forward a very strong argument on Corrode. She feels that sort of jack of all trades initiator role with flashes and info, but I honestly think Gekko does that better these days, and even then you're better off fully opting into info with something like Fade or Sova, and then just getting your flashes from a duelist instead. Don't let me stop you from playing Skye here if you enjoy her, but again, there are just better options. Tejo actually surprised me a bit on Corrode, particularly towards the A side. His util actually fits the map really well. Even without his ultimate, you can make a decent push out of A main, and then with Armageddon, you can just shut down Elbow immediately. Having said that, in ranked, I just don't think he's that good of an agent, particularly after the nerfs. I wouldn't be playing him personally, but I'm sure you can make him work if you really wanted to. Now, I am a pretty avid breach hater these days, and that doesn't change much with Corrode. However, even I have to admit there are some decent lines you'll find here for his stuns. There are a lot of corners to clear on this map, and if you'd rather flush them out instead of just finding them, then breach is a decent option for you. Maybe you're duoed with a duelist and want to set them up or something like that as well. He's definitely viable, and pushing out defensively with his ultimate is going to feel strong, especially towards B main, but again, like I keep saying, I just think the other initiators are better. One of the ones I think is simply better here is going to be Gekko. The reason I like Gekko on Corrode is the map is sort of designed around these layered defenses, and they've got that in mind, well, for the defenders, and it's really well suited to his playstyle because you just throw out one piece of utility at a time, clear an area, pick it up, and then just rinse and repeat. There's a good info flash towards B, and Wingman is also going to be pretty handy to plant the spike if the Ode meta gets out of hand. And then he still has a very solid ultimate which you can pick up and use twice, so I'd say Gekko is a pretty strong pick here. Then we've got Sova, who always thrives on these bigger maps, and I'm sure there's going to be plenty of lineups people will have to recon and shock literally every square inch of this map. Like I already said with Cypher, and will say shortly with Fade, anything that lets you see through walls on Corrode is going to be handy, so Sova with his darts and even drone will be strong. Then of course his shocks can pretty reliably take out Cypher's trips, and I would argue he's the most popular sentinel in ranked right now, so having a Sova to counter him isn't that bad of an idea. The only reason I don't have Sova as the strongest is because I actually put Fade above him, which has been a while trying to figure this out because I think Sova in the meta in general is in a better spot right now. Fade's two Prowlers feel like they give her a slight edge here. Even though the map feels massive, the sides themselves aren't that big, and so they can pretty reliably clear out a lot of space. And then similar to Breach, you'll have a lot of great ults to push out defensively with, and in general just clear a lot of space. Like I said with Sova, scans on this map are going to have some insane potential, and so I would almost always want one of these two agents on my team, maybe even both of them. So for the initiators overall, I would say you absolutely want a recon initiator, so get one of Sova or Fade, and then for flashes you can honestly just go with a Yoru or a Phoenix. Then like I said, I think Gekko fits the map pretty well, and as far as the other four initiators go, play them if you're good at them and really want to, but I know that I'll be sticking to those top three. That brings us to the duelists, and there isn't much to say about Reyna in all honesty. There's next to no difference from map to map when we're talking about ranked. Maybe her flash becomes slightly better on bigger maps because it has infinite range, but realistically this to me is just another Clove situation where the agent is just designed with ranked demons in mind. People will play them regardless because they're fun and you can stomp with them. The map seems irrelevant. Waylay actually surprised me on Corrode. Her buff to saturate feels strong and you can utilize it a lot whether you're attacking or defending. The window on A side is handy, and it's arguably even better on B with the low wall. Beyond that, you can go for some nice ultimates pushing out. However, I do think she still suffers from that problem of just dumping all your util in the first 5 seconds of the round and having nothing left after that. and she's hard for solo queue anyway, so I wouldn't really recommend playing her just yet. Next is Raze, and I think this is a pretty poor Raze map, all things considered. I wouldn't go as far as to say that she is bad here. You can make any duelist work if you want to, but I think the reason Raze feels less impactful to me is because the wider choke points and areas in general, they're pretty hard for her to clear out. Normally a nade will do the job, but a lot of open space here. There are some tighter areas like in towards A link, the Boomba will fit nicely, but overall I'd rather play a different duelist. And then we've got Jett. She feels okay on Corrode to me. One thing I've noticed towards the A side is that I don't think duelists feel as necessary in general because the choke point is so wide open, but at least for Jett, from both sides you can peek through the window when you're ulting. Then on the B side, there aren't really any obvious places you would always want to dash towards, like yeah, you could go into cubby, but then you're hardly clearing anything or making much space. And then the only other place you could really dash to is under the hut, and that leaves you pretty exposed when the smoke fades. I'm sure she'll still be playable, don't get me wrong, and of course you can get up into heaven if you want, but I think some of the other duelists are better. For ISO, I was originally going to put him in just the ranked tier with Reyna, but he is able to get a lot of unique value with his wall. From either side of mid, you can threaten pushing up behind it, and it is also one of the few answers to Odin spam in the game, allowing you to at least secure half of the spike. I do wonder if his shield will feel bad, because if you get tagged through a wall, the enemy will hear it and continue to spam you, but we'll have to see how that plays out. And then next I've actually got Neon, who I think will do nicely on this map. I reckon with her wall you can split both sides nicely pretty well. Then there are some pretty easy stun, I don't even know if you'd call them lineups, but just places to throw them that pretty easily get value and cover a lot of space. I wouldn't call this a super good Neon map, it's not on the level of like Fracture for example, but I definitely think she's pretty good here. Phoenix is next, and he's probably going to be a pretty strong pick on this map because the ult orbs are pretty easy to get for attackers, especially the one outside of B, and that will allow you to farm ultimates. On both sides there are some simple walls you can do to threaten walking out and make the enemy team check for you, and he's also just the perfect solo queue agent really, very self-sufficient and good at taking fights. The free flash a while ago was a nice buff, and you really can't go wrong with Phoenix here. Finally, that brings us to Yoru, who is going to be a beast on Corrode. The defensive rotations on this map take so long, but he can completely skip those, and I don't think it's ever been so useful to have a long range teleport like this. Beyond that, people are finally discovering how good of an agent he is. It can be hard to get full value out of his more initiator-like util in ranked, just with actually being on the same page as your teammates, but I think he fits this map like a glove. His clone is going to be great for baiting out Sentinel util, and I think he goes nicely with Sova and Fade since they lack flashes. But yeah, that is how I think all of the Valorant agents fall into place on the new map Corrode. My S tier is basically what I think the ideal ranked comp is, maybe a Cypher instead of Vyse, and you'll probably have a Clove more often than not. Realistically, even in the highest ranks, you can make anything work. Even the agents that I consider to be bad, they're all obviously playable. That is just how I would rank them personally, but feel free to disagree in the comments and let me know what you think.